Cool. Yeah, well, welcome everyone. Yeah, really happy to be here today. We'll be doing a presentation, a bit of a case study on a multi-year project that the agency I work for, Manifesto, engaged with alongside the University of Edinburgh. And yeah, we'll be highlighting some of the key learnings and growth that we all experienced through the course of this pretty ambitious project. I am James South, Principal Engineer at Manifesto. I am the human in the picture, not the dog. And I have been at Manifesto, or various incarnations of it, for about 15 years. And for the majority of that time, been working extensively with Drupal. And yeah, here was Aaron.
I am Aaron McHale. I am the technical lead for Prospective Student Web at the University of Edinburgh. I'm also part of the committee for Drupal Scotland. So for anyone who has heard of Drupal Camp Scotland, I am one of those people. And according to my Drupal.org profile, I've been on Drupal.org for over 17 years now, which is I don't want to think about that. So cool. So. There we go.
So yeah, just a real quick bit about Manifesto. So we're a human-centric agency that has design and tech services. We work extensively with Drupal. Here are some logos of some clients that we have delivered recent Drupal projects for. So yeah, we've got functions around design, build, UX, strategy, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and the Prospective Student Web team at the University of Edinburgh, we essentially lead the development of the online experience for prospective students. So we collaborate across the organisation. We have about 23 different schools. We have multiple different central services. We're a very big, devolved organisation. So we collaborate across all of those units. And the degree finder, the degree finder at University of Edinburgh is the main thing that we do. And in a lot of ways, it is an aggregator of information. So we bring together information from across the organisation and present it in a unified web experience for prospective students. I think I'll just keep moving. Yeah, so we were established in 2019, and we're established in 2019, and the goal with Prospective Student Web was that our digital services will be the attractive and trustworthy primary location for information which is prioritized and structured to align with the prospective student goals and experiences. And so essentially what it means is that we want to deliver great user-centered services for prospective students. And I'm just going to check. Yeah, and so that slide is just basically what I was saying about that. So I think I'm going to check. I don't know if is the slides moved? Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah, I was just checking because I think this one slide might have moved around. But anyway, so the importance of degree finder to university, it is some universities talk about a course finder. We talk about it as a degree finder, but whatever you call it, it is the primary gateway that prospective students use to access information about the programs and courses that we offer. It's kind of like, you can think of it like a virtual campus visit. So what is that? Whatever you call it, is the primary way that we drive enrollment, and it is the authoritative source of information. So if you're a prospective student, you want to study at Edinburgh, you can use it to find out about the programs that we offer, but also what it's like to study at Edinburgh. So what it's going to be like when you come there. So it's a pretty important. It's probably the most important part of our web estate. Yeah, and then that was the vision that I'd mentioned. Really. As I said, essentially we exist to deliver really great user-centered services. So, but yeah, the current degree finder, we had some problems with it. So, poor usability and student experience. So it was too difficult for prospective students to answer basic questions. And that was leading to high level of inquiries. So the underlying technology was also quite outdated. Hadn't really changed in over a decade, or not actually longer than that. Hadn't really seen any significant change, but it was also structured around the print mindset. So And the content, the actual underlying content model hadn't changed since the 1990s. So I was born in 1993, and I've seen a lot of change since then in the world. So yeah, if our content model hadn't evolved since then, think about how different the world is now compared to then. So we really needed a new content model. We needed to evolve the provision. And information was not comprehensive. There was a lot of central websites and school sites that were created just to plug a gap that the degree finder was not adequately filling. Okay, so this diagram, I joined Prospective Student Web in 2020, just after we formed, and I created this, what I call our people, processes, and systems diagram. So this was partly to help me better understand our architecture. But essentially, what it is showing here is that the degree finder, which you can see in the middle of the upper middle of the diagram, and the university website, which is the CMSU called EdWeb, are two very separate applications, right? And there's a lot of manual process. So on this diagram, there's some dotted lines, the pink ones that kind of represent different manual processes from different systems and processes that exist around Degree Finder. And there's a lot of outdated technology. Has anyone ever worked with Cold Fusion? Cold Fusion is on there. I hadn't until I joined the team. And I never want to again. So yeah, and there's also a lot of different teams. This diagram was built in Miro, and it was built up we built the understanding. So there's you'll see a lot of different colored little tiny post-it notes. So they all represent like different teams that we work with. So as I was saying, there's a lot of different people and teams involved in the Degree Finder. Yeah, so some of the strategic priorities as we look to rebuild, we wanted to reduce the number of ineligible or wasted applications. So this is a big one because what we're essentially saying is that we want people to be able to self-identify. We want people to be able to look at the website, look at the content, and clearly understand that if they submit an application that they're going to have a chance at being accepted. Because for every application that someone submits that isn't successful, that's their time, but also staff time that's taken up. And we're a very competitive university, so yeah, anything we can do to reduce the number of applications we get, and that's things like around the entry requirements. So we need to make the entry requirements clear to understand because they were not very clear. We also need to have the key information, key student needs had to be really delivered in one place. So. The content model, as I was mentioning earlier, hadn't changed since the 90s. And there's a lot of generic content, extra websites that exist, content that was centered, we want to make the content centered around the students' interests in a program. So rather than having all that content on different parts of the web estate, we needed to do better bringing that together into one place. And ultimately, that should also lead to a reduction in inquiries, because if people can self-identify and self-serve and answer the questions that they have, that will lead to a drop in inquiries. We also needed to basically to improve the content management. So Prospective Student Web, we need to be much more involved in the updating of content, and we really need to take much more ownership of the process, because part of the problem is we had lots and lots of editors all updating bits of the website that they were responsible for, and so we really needed to come in and bring a sort of a much more cohesive content management practice. So it was very satisfying when we got to remove a lot of access for different people to the website. So and we also needed to have basically having things like analytics, data, feeding information. So taking information from our analytics, looking at doing analytics on the website. We have a lot of colleagues that look at the kind of information about things like Google Analytics and other tools that we have, and bring those together to help us make better decisions. So rather than us going up and saying, oh, we think that's a good thing to do, making decisions based on data, we even do things like pop-up usability testing. In fact, next week we're going to campus, talk to students, do some usability testing to understand, is this something that's going to work? So and at the end of the day, we wanted to rationalize the information across the web estate, particularly at school level. So again, as I said, an improved central provision would reduce the amount of other websites and content that needed to exist and be published across the web estate. So moving on to some of the challenges we were aware of. Dependencies on other teams. I just on the diagram earlier, there's a lot of different teams involved here. And they all had their own different priorities and their different timelines. So, we need to work with them to understand when they were available. There's a lot of unknowns in the wider web estate. So, cold fusion's on that diagram. What else might be fine if we go looking? We need to align the development and delivery with the recruitment cycle. So for undergraduate programs, the recruitment cycle starts 18 months out. So we're actually, as of next week, we're entering a phase where for 6 months, we will have 2 years of programs live on the website at the same time. So how we manage that content is an interesting challenge in itself. Access to data sources to deliver a better experience. There's data that's owned by lots of different teams. As I was mentioning, being an aggregator of information, we need to pull that data together. So there's a lot of data delivered by people exporting spreadsheets, importing those into other systems. Part of it was about how can we bring data in so we can shut down more bits of those, more legacy websites and legacy applications. There we go. So the plan that we put together, so actually I put up here as a year 0 because that was sort of 2022 into 2023, 2021 into 2022. We did a lot of planning leading up to this, and we did a lot of user research, validation. There was a lot of content auditing and modeling, and we also ran a series of design sprints. So working with colleagues from across the organization, bringing them in and working with them to design and say, what could a better experience look like here? Then as we got into the first year, the project, when things actually kicked off, we did the development of the undergraduate experience. We launched a beta. So we had a site live where we had just three course program pages on there. And then we used that to get feedback. So we had a feedback form on there that people could submit feedback, but we also did a lot of usability testing with that, so that we could get information about how is this performing. And then as we went into future years, that was then used to inform the development and changes that we wanted to make. And then as we got into that second year, when we handed over the website to our content operations team, they do a great job at populating the content. Our content team's building out the new website experience. And in the final years, we moved into sort of development of the postgraduate side of things. And doing a lot of we did a lot more continuous improvement and continuous testing. We started to integrate additional data sources. So some of the stuff that you'll see later in the slides where we've managed to actually automate some of those manual processes. And so the team structure, just to mention, in Prospective Student Web, we sit under communications and marketing. We have technical resource, we've got analytics, user experience, we've got content design, content operations. And when manifesto came in, it's almost like manifesto came in and sort of supplemented the team. So bringing in a project management resource, bringing in an additional technical resource, and also QA resource. And the way that this is laid out is very intentional because it really did feel like we were working as one team. So not as two separate teams. And then just to pass over to James, I'm going to talk through some of the learnings that we had.
Nice one. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So I guess the core challenge of this blended team was that from the agency side and from the university side, there were different gaps that needed to be filled in. Speaking from the agency side, one of the biggest challenges was trying to download the institutional knowledge around the university so that we kind of fully understood the context in which this work was being performed in. And then likewise from the university side, there was probably varying levels of experience and familiarity, like delivering functional, like an end-to-end delivery of kind of functional software. So there was a lot to learn on that side as well. And again, very ambitious project. So we wanted to really kind of hit the ground running and make sure we were operating at a high level from the off. Filling in those gaps and those initial immersion stages of the project were really critically important. This is where having access to the likes of Aaron, who has a deep knowledge of the systems, processes, people at the university was really helpful. Getting face-to-face, hands-on time with them to help support us kind of with that knowledge. there was, as Aaron said as well, a lot of really good work had happened already during this year zero. So we wanted to make sure we capitalized on that and leveraged all the good work that had come before us. And as well as that, set up the systems and the ways of working that we could follow throughout the rest of the 3 years of the project. A really challenging aspect of this project was the fact that alongside this work on the Degree Finder project, the university was also going through a separate, really ambitious project around upgrading and migrating a large portion of their digital estate off their legacy Drupal 7 platform. So there was a really considered approach to how our product, our service, that had very unique kind of bespoke needs compared to maybe other websites that were part of the new estate. The challenge was, how do we facilitate the delivery of that whilst not completely upending this existing model that had been rolled out for the rest of the estate. That meant having to engage with like a wide group of stakeholders and to make sure there was very kind of careful decisions made around like the operating model and the support model that would kind of sit behind the new Degree Finder. An element of that was being able to kind of quite clearly communicate kind of very, kind of technical aspects to like the solution architecture in a way that, again, that diverse set of stakeholders can understand and have an informed opinion around. If we take option A, what that means in terms of the ongoing kind of support and maintenance and responsibilities around the new service. Another real big challenge was just how complex some of this content could be for the undergraduate and postgraduate kind of programs. Each of them had easily 100 plus fields, as well as like an extensive set of metadata. There was a lot of data around entry requirements and the actual module kind of syllabus kind of content of the program themselves. So it was really important there was that kind of real considered approach to how we best use all the available tools Drupal gives us for content modeling to implement that quite complex content model in a way that doesn't inhibit us from the content editing experience we want to deliver. So there's a balance just to strike there. And in reality, that involved basically playing around with some different ways of modeling that and then evaluating that to ensure that as the years go on and there's multiple revisions and multiple editions of these programs, that everything still holds together and continues to be functional and performant. In terms of the working practices and the ways of working, a real key part of this in terms of the blended team was having a well-maintained and a frequently updated knowledge hub across kind of wiki spaces in GitLab, across kind of carefully curated kind of SharePoint, across lots and lots of Miro boards. There was a real strong focus on documenting things, including kind of key decisions that had been made. So we had that audit trail, had the record of that, the decisions that had been made previously, and that was frequently refreshed and reviewed and updated at the start of each of those years to ensure the content kind of remained relevant and up to date over time. We had to treat CMS editors as first-class citizens. There were lots of quite complex workflows around how the content ops team kind of function as it pertains to the annual recruitment cycle, as it pertains to different editions of the programs being published. So we had to do this in a way that meant we could mirror those human processes as closely as possible. Obviously, Drupal is a great platform for that in terms of giving us the ability to define kind of very bespoke workflows, different moderation states, etc., revisions, commenting functionality, all that good stuff that all kind of supported an effective kind of content moderation workflow for the editors using it. This project was a really good example of why we do follow agile principles and practice in general as an industry, and that is because there was a lot of change. The most notable instance of that was kind of during the first year we established that, or we identified that that very ambitious work going on elsewhere in the university around upgrading the estate was not necessarily going to be completely compatible with the work we were doing. So we had to very quickly change tact and actually turn that year one into more of a beta, more of a proof of concept, that would then give other teams in the university the time and space to continue with the migration efforts before we could jump back in and continue developing our degree finder service. So kind of working, assuming there will be some elements of change, was kind of real key to this, and it allowed us to pivot and still get value out of, again, producing that beta, using that as a testing ground for modeling like the undergraduate content using the new EdWeb 2 platform. So we kind of shifted gears without kind of throwing off the project entirely. Another really useful thing was the fact that we had a product owner who was very keen not to reinvent the wheel or recreate things that already existed elsewhere within the university. Speak of my own experience as well, like obviously working with higher education organisations, working with charities, working with local councils, they all have the same issue of having to do more with less and very kind of tight budgets. And this, the way this was alleviated here was, again, having a product owner who was very keen to make sure we weren't redesigning or rebuilding patterns that exist elsewhere in the estate. Again, one of the great things about Drupal is the extensive community of modules. So using that kind of wherever possible and only developing our own custom solutions where there was unique kind of like business, like bespoke business logic we needed to implement. And then also, again, to make sure the work we were doing kind of had as much value as possible, finding opportunities to either commit that back to some of the wider work going on in the university, or without spoiling our own side at the end, also contributing some of this work back to Drupal.org. Structured collaboration was essential. I am historically quite a lazy person when it comes to meetings, and this was kind of the project that proved to me how important it is to have very clear agendas kind of going into session.
Never got that impression. He's a very diligent LinkedIn person.
So having a real kind of structured way to record talking points throughout the week within kind of the functionality we had in our team space, and using that as the way to populate the agenda for those meetings, having kind of really clear outcomes and kind of defined goals of those meetings, and having employing kind of very structured approaches to discussions around things. I think a really good instance is very early on. There was a very kind of critical decision to be made around what we want the content ops workflow to look like in terms of, do we use gather content / binder, or do we manage all of this within Drupal? So obviously, that is a decision that would have real big implications in terms of the project over the next couple of years. So having a real attacking that in a real kind of clear way to produce like an agreed outcome was very important. Getting launch ready. As we got to the end of the second year, when we had the undergraduate and postgraduate content in a state where the degree finder was ready to launch, we had to make sure there was kind of clear responsibilities and clear way to operate as this transitioned from a in-development service to a live service. So making sure there was kind of clear split of responsibility between manifesto, the agency, between the PSW team, between other areas of the university, and the likes of Pantheon as the hosting platform. So if there is an issue, like the resolution path for that was clearly defined. And finally for me, kind of promoting the work was really important. One thing the university does a great job at is through their blog, sharing updates around the service as it was going through development and since it's launched. Again, at Manifesto as well, we're very fortunate to work with a lot of higher education organisations. So being able to share knowledge between those different organisations is a very effective thing to do. And I know Edinburgh are also really engaged with other organisations as well to make sure there's those shared learnings and the time and effort spent goes as far as possible. And it's also great to have the opportunity to come to events like this and run through this, and also at non-Drupal events as well. It's great to use this as an opportunity to present Drupal as an excellent platform for delivering kind of this type of kind of product and service. Circulating that, like the good news and the success story, is, I think, really important. For the whole team.
Yeah, and so some of the reflections that we had. So this is a quote from Lauren Tormey, who's one of our senior content designers. I learned when building software, you shouldn't just ask, is the design feasible? The better question to ask, is there a better way to design this? And I love this quote so much because it really embodies how we worked and the collaborative spirit that was involved. Similarly, Pete Watson, who's our UX specialist in Prospective Student Web, feedback from the dev team helped me to understand how to hand over prototype designs that met their needs. This has helped bridge the gap, the communication gap between UX and the development. And again, really love this quote from Pete because it just embodies, as I said, with Lauren's quote, so much of how we worked and how collaborative it was. And I think that was, for me as a technical person, it was one of the most rewarding parts because it meant that what was being handed over to be built and be specced out on the technical side, I knew had gone through rounds of testing and research. And so I knew that what we were building first time was going to be right and we wouldn't need to come back and rebuild it. And then finally, Alistair Moore, who is somewhere here today, is from Manifesto, Senior Engineer Manifesto, who worked on the whole of the project with us. What stood out most was the genuine sense of collaboration. We weren't just building a product, we were exploring ideas together, learning from one another, and finding better ways to solve problems. And again, love that quote from Alistair, really embodies that sort of collaborative nature of how we worked. In terms of where we are now, so we've reduced the size of the study site in terms of content by 57%. Remember I was talking about having generic content across the web estate in different sites and things. So that's allowed us to, the new content model that we rebuilt, not just building a like for like, but completely starting from scratch, meant that we were able to significantly reduce generic content and move the content much more closer to where prospective students needed it. Over 24 million pages served since the undergraduate launch in March last year. That is according to statistics on Pantheon, where they calculate that as like the number of full pages. So quite an impressive amount of content and again, that's all coming from Drupal, coming through CDN. So yeah, it just really shows the power of what Drupal can handle. We've had over 10 software releases of feature and bug fixes since launch. In our sort of previous CMS, we would never have been able to deliver things at that speed. And the simplified architecture and content management and automation, the fact that we now have content, like the entire content workflows are all in a single system. They're all done in Drupal. Everything from that initial draft through to publish means that we no longer have to spend time with people copying and pasting content. But I mean, previously we literally had people that would come in that were employed just to copy and paste content between systems, right? So like, there's been so much more efficiency gained just on our operational side, just by bringing that all into a single place into Drupal. Okay, this is the most satisfying thing to look at. This is the diagram on the left you saw was the one from earlier, and then I did an updated version 2025. There's just like an entire section gone from that diagram, right? And the thing I love about that is that it means it's because what we've been able to do is bring the degree finder much more closer into the web estate. So as I said, rather than thinking about those as the degree finder as a separate application from the website, it's now a core part of the web estate. We've also been able to automate process. So you'll see, it's kind of hard to see, but some of the kind of dotted lines have become solid lines, particularly on the right side of the diagram, where we now have automated change-based APIs feeding data into Drupal, which is fantastic because, again, one of the things that we had before where if a program was closed for applications, it could sometimes take up to a day or two for that to show on the website because there was those manual processes of moving data, whereas now that happens more or less instantly, which is great. There's also, you'll notice the Cold Fusion is no longer there on that diagram. That was, to be fair, that was a separate project, but it was just a nice kind of alignment of things that made that diagram look better. And the thing I was saying about the degree finder being a core part of the web estate, if I zoom in on that middle area, what we'll see is, as I said, no longer is it a separate application, but it is now, what we think of degree finder is really just a collection of features, of modules, of functionality in Drupal built on top of the study site, on top of the EdWeb 2 Drupal platform that we have at the university. So really satisfying kind of outcome where we've got to now. But in typical Apple fashion, there's one more thing. And James alluded to this earlier. As I said, I've been in the Drupal community for a long time. I've come to a lot of events like this. And so working on a project like this, one of the things that was really, I was always kind of looking for opportunities where we could contribute back. as an organization, as a university, that is something that we are, as part of our core, is enriching the world, sharing our learnings and things. So as part of this project, we were able to publish 2 modules on Drupal.org. So the one on the left is one that is still in slightly kind of active development, but it's called Content Moderation Bulk State Change. So it allows us it provides a bulk action in views that we can use to select a whole load of content. We can use the bulk action to then, it shows the content moderation form, and we can choose the state to move the content to. So because we've got such complex workflows, there wasn't an existing module that kind of did it in this way. And so we've published this module, and it's fantastic because our content teams are really love using this functionality, because it means they can move many programs at once through the workflow in the way that makes sense. And as you saw, we have a lot of workflows, so having separate actions for every stage wouldn't have been sustainable for us. And the second one is a much simpler module, but it was originally a sandbox project that our colleague Alistair found. But the contextual filter from referrer, it's quite neat because it allows you to have it allows us to pass the node to an entity reference view. So it's a quite neat little module there. So yeah, so that's been really rewarding to see it. We're continuing to, particularly the content moderation one, we're continuing to iterate and build on that. So yeah, and I think that is everything that we've got. So yeah, thank you for listening to us talk today. And if any questions. Okay, if there is any questions.
I've got one that might be a little bit too specific to the university context, but is it currently legal?
There might, yeah.
It might be a bit too specific to the university context, so I can talk to you later on about it if you prefer. One of the things that we're currently rebuilding our standard course system as well. And one of the things that we're finding challenging is around the approvals process for module specific, really fine-grained detail. And essentially, it's form a legal contract. If you publish documents,
like CMA compliance and things.
If you change your base,
yeah.
You need to track all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you put everybody in Drupal, or do you have something outside of that that helps with that process?
So it's funny you're talking about it, because there's a lot going on around CMA compliance at the moment that we're looking at, because there's some new rules that came out. What we essentially do is we do have, so our ops team have a kind of SharePoint place that they use to track major changes. But what we also do is on the content, we have at the bottom an updates to this page section, which is a pattern we got from, I think it was GovUK. And so there we will, if there is major changes to content, we will publish it there. But in general, one of the ways that our content workflows are set up is so that with every new cycle, so every annual cycle, every refresh, we clone the entire what we call edition. And so that allows for us to have, we can go back and we can see all previous years of programs as they change. So if we do need to go back, because if someone comes in 5 years and says, oh, that's not what I was promised, we can go back and we can see what the content was at the time. So it gives us a bit more than just revisions, because it is actually, we can go back and see these are separate nodes in Drupal, so to speak, for each year. So that is quite helpful. But it's just a combination of things. And I think that's something that figuring out the right internal processes. I don't know if there's anything you maybe want to add, James, about kind of any experience you might have in these areas, but no.
No, you nailed it.
No. Great. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful. Happy to have any follow-up conversations as well around these things. I'm around the rest of the day, so yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering how you dealt with the issue that often comes up where it's it can make more sense for the data model to split certain pieces of information into different entities, the course, and then the masters and the bachelors, the one with the extra year or not. From a data point of view, it feels better to split that apart, but then from an editor point of view, having that split into different, they'd quite like to have one form to build. I was wondering how you guys dealt with that problem.
There's some interesting stuff, wasn't there, around that we early in the project.
Yeah, I think as you identified, that is the that's the balance there. It's what is best for the model in abstract versus actually what is best in practice when you factor in the editorial concerns as well. Obviously, with things like inline entity reference forms, that does bridge the gap a bit in terms of giving you that kind of single unified form. And I guess the best thing it does there is it hides the complexity of what's under the hood there, whilst obviously keeping that same the schema the way you want it. So I'd say the good news is I think through purely like country over community modules, there are pretty solid out the box ways to let you strike that balance. As we said, like due to the volume, probably more so than balancing those editorial concerns, it's probably just doing this in a way that we can handle the volume of like content. When you think, as Aaron said there, we have to kind of clone the content for different like years of the program. Obviously, managing kind of revisions on that as well. Doing that in a really kind of scalable and performant way that can also support, again, the quite rich content editing experience we wanted. That was probably the slightly more challenging bit, and that's where we probably had a bit more of a focus, like evaluating the different ways we could do this, like either through like defining a lot of kind of custom entities, or like the storage entities country module, or trying to do as much as possible just with like core field like UI. So yeah, I think that scalability aspect was the real tough one to crack.
One of the interesting things actually, so like interesting examples around entry requirements, because right now those are managed on the node itself. You know, you go in and edit entry requirements, but actually in hindsight, and what we might do in the future is separate those out into their own content type. Still like present them in the program page, but because actually it turns out, as we kind of discovered over the last couple of years, that the way that that content is managed really needs its own workflow. So like if you have content that needs a separate workflow, then actually, yeah, you could in theory have like separate things. And we have an internal concept called a CAM ID, which is basically an identifier that each program page will have, and then other entities will have the identifiers. It's kind of like an entity reference that we can tie together, but it is also like it's consistent across our editions. So like say business and accounting will have the same ID across years. So you can there's things like that we did to keep it, try to reference things across different entities, because it's sometimes it's hard. But I think the good thing with Drupal, like if you need to re-architect things later on, Drupal's great with migrations and things, at being able to then change the model later on if you need to. But
sorry, I have an extra. You were saying this is obviously built on Edward 2.
yeah.
How have you guys gone ahead with splitting the sort of code-wise break? Do you still own your stuff on top of EdWeb 2? How do you determine what goes back into the wider EdWeb and what actually you hold out on yours? How do the teams work together, or do you all come back in under one?
Yeah, it's funny that, because so technically I sit I sit within Prospective Web, but also within the like central web function. So there's that relationship, but in a more like technical, like in a more kind of practical sense, there's a GitLab repository for the study site, and we have agreed principles of like, okay, for the study site's code will live, like the modules will be over here and its config will be over here. And so like using things like config split to separate that out, and having the process of saying, okay, we then, merge changes from the upstream into the GitLab repository, and that gets pushed out to the site. So doing that in GitLab is quite helpful, I think. I know you were also quite involved in this. Anything you want to add?
Yeah. Even quite basic things as well, like how you name things. Like
naming is really important.
like machine names on all the various kind of fields and entities. Just because we're adding a feature doesn't mean that feature in a slightly different way might not appear in the future, and you don't want those conflicts there. I think, as Aaron said, like during the initial build, there was a real careful consideration around like which of the buckets a given feature falls into. Is it specific enough that it should be built into the degree finder pages within the study site, or is it more broadly usable? And if so, that's when we started the conversation around, actually, can we shift some of our development efforts and time over to the broader Red Web 2 project and used as an opportunity to build that feature there. So yeah, it was, again, this was probably an area of kind of real significant effort and complexity kind of during the original build. I don't know, like since we've moved into like the more like support phase of it now, like how have you found that, Aaron, like in terms of any new features?
I think it's been, I said it's that mostly it's like building something very specific for the needs of our operations team or our colleagues in schools or our end users that is never going to exist on another site. For instance, we basically said from the start, program pages will never exist on school sites, right? This is the central site is the authoritative source. But one thing we've said that we will eventually do, and this is still eventually, is provide a way for them to embed lists of programs on their sites.
Yeah.
So that is a conversation we've been having. And so, yeah, I suppose it's like knowing from the start, like having those things in place and saying these are the things we know will only exist centrally is probably helpful to that. But then, yeah, like this is naming conventions, like we have for config, like all of the config starts with a certain prefix, so it will automatically split out, that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, we could probably go on more with that, so feel free. We can chat more about this. Yeah. I know you guys are doing some stuff on this. Yeah. Very timely conversations. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
We did it! Yeah!